What words and phrases should you avoid using during a job interview? In today's video, I'm going to talk you through the things that you should never say in a job interview. And by the way, if you don't already know me, my name is Dasha, and on this channel, I teach English and give personal development tips. So without any further ado, let's get into it. During your interview, your job is to make the hiring manager understand that you, above all other candidates, are the right person for the job. And the best way to do this is to prepare answers to common questions in advance. But equally, you also need to be aware of the things that you should not say during an interview that might get in the way of you landing your dream job. A pro tip here: before answering any question during your interview, take a second to reflect on your answer and to choose your words very, very carefully. So the first word to avoid is perfectionist. Now, as you may already know, one of the most common interview questions is, what is your biggest weakness? The main purpose of this question is to make the hiring manager understand whether A, you're able to identify a weakness in yourself and are therefore able to accept that you're not perfect, and B, your greatest weakness is something that you can work on and will not get in the way of the quality of your work. If you say that your weakness is that you're a perfectionist, you not only sound incredibly cheesy, but you're telling the hiring manager that your biggest flaw is a personality trait, being perfectionism. And a personality trait is not something that can be easily changed or improved. Whereas if you answer that question by saying that your biggest weakness is, for example, your communication skills, that's something that can be easily improved. My tip here is to avoid saying that you're a perfectionist and instead mention a skill that you're working to improve, and also say how you're doing that by providing concrete examples. The next word you should avoid repeating over and over again is the personal pronoun I. But you really need to be careful here. On the one hand, the hiring manager will want to know exactly what you did in your past job. They'll want to know what part you played in a team project and so on. And so here, using the word I is absolutely necessary. But if you overuse the word I in other contexts, you'll come off as very egocentric and also give off the impression that you're a person that only thinks about themselves. So if you're talking about a personal achievement, make sure to let the other person know how it benefited the whole company and what it meant for the team that you worked with. One other thing you should avoid doing during your job interview is talking negatively about your previous employer. It's a huge red flag. This can be very tempting, especially if you're leaving your previous job because of a crappy employer. We've all been there. But when the interviewer asks you why are you looking for a new position, you need to remain professional and steer away from bad-mouthing your former employer. Here's the thing: if you talk about someone or a company negatively, you're indirectly making yourself look bad, as if you're talking negatively about yourself. Plus, if you're the type of person that's very quick to speak negatively about your former employer, then what's stopping you from talking badly about your potential employer in the future? And that's exactly how the hiring manager will be thinking. So as much as you dislike your former employer and the old job, focus on the things the position you are applying to has to offer that your previous employer wasn't able to offer. You could say something like, while I've enjoyed my time at ABC Limited, I feel like I have outgrown the position. My current employer, unfortunately, does not offer any managerial roles, and I'm therefore looking to find an opportunity where I can take my skills and experience to the next level. Another thing you shouldn't say at a job interview is that you're nervous. It's of course absolutely okay to feel nervous, but just don't say it. And the reason being is that confidence is a huge factor that can either make or break your job interview. It shows that you're well prepared for the interview, and it's a good sign that you'll be confident and decisive in your future role at the company if you were to be hired. Also, by saying I'm nervous, you're gonna make yourself even more nervous, which will set a negative tone throughout the whole interview. So rather than saying, oh gosh, I'm really nervous, you could say, I'm very excited to be here. Up next is the deadly phrase, it's on my CV, or it's on my resume. If the hiring manager asks you a question about something that's on your CV, you better answer it, even if the answer is on the resume. The reason someone is asking you that question is because they want you to elaborate and provide additional information. So if that happens, a pro tip here is to answer their question using very specific examples that validate your skills and experience. Let's imagine that your CV says that you have experience in drafting contracts. If the interviewer asks you a question about it, you could elaborate by talking about what kind of contracts did you draft? How complex were they? Were you supervised? Did you use your analytical skills or any other skills? And so on. Now, I want to talk about the use of filler words and sounds such as like and Think of it this way, your interview will last anywhere between half an hour to an hour. That's quite a short amount of time if you come to think of it, and you need to use it wisely. So if at every answer to a question you start by saying, you won't make a great impression. I actually have a video about the most overused words in the English language, which you should totally check out after this video. You'll find a link to it somewhere over here. The bottom line here is that no matter what role you're applying to, it's important to sound as concise and eloquent as possible. So if you're ever tempted to begin a sentence with simply pause. There's absolutely nothing wrong with taking a paused moment before you reply. Just be patient. Turning to the words I don't know. It could very well happen that the interviewer asks you a question that you didn't prepare or that you just can't answer. And it can get very awkward very quickly. But fear not, there are 3 ways to go about it. By the way, I've tried them all and I can safely say that they work. Number 1, you simply ask the hiring manager if you could have a minute to think about your reply. So you could say something like, that's actually a great question. Do you mind if I take a minute to think about it? Or number 2, you could ask them for additional information or to clarify the question. That way you'll buy yourself a very short moment to think about an answer to a question that's not really that complicated. And number 3, you could use this opportunity to ask for a glass of water or a pen and paper. So you could say something like, oh, that's a great question. Do you think I could have a glass of water before I go ahead and answer it? I do actually realize that the third option only works in face-to-face meetings, but if you're on a Zoom call, you could simply take a glass of water and have a sip to buy yourself some time. But all the same, there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking the interviewer if you could have a minute or 2 to think of a response. But saying I don't know is a showstopper. Next on our list is the word stuff. It's not only overused in day-to-day conversation, it generally makes a person sound very vague. That's because we all have stuff, we all know stuff, and we all talk about stuff. The word itself doesn't bring any value or insight. It's just an empty shell of a word. But if you really want to talk about the stuff you're referring to, then use specific words. This will of course depend on the context, but in general, try to think of words like task or maybe even responsibility. It's especially important to avoid using the word stuff in technical interviews where you're expected to know the industry jargon and technical language. This is why preparing for a job interview is so crucial, and knowing which words not to use is as important as knowing which words you should use. And that's a wrap. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to hit that like button if you found it useful and subscribe to my channel for more great content. Drop me a comment below if you've ever used any of these words in a job interview and whether that affected the outcome. And I hope to see you soon. Bye!